Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. In this week's Torah portion, the Torah says that the mirrors of the women were used to build a wash basin out of copper at the entrance of the tent of meeting. You see, every day when the Kohen began his daily service, he washed his hands from a special wash basin, and it was made out of copper. And the Torah tells us it was b'maros hatzovos, from the women of the legions who donated their copper mirrors, because in the olden days they didn't have silver backing mirrors, they had copper that they shined, and they used it to see their reflection. And the women donated these copper mirrors, and Moses made the kior and the kano, the wash basin and the laver, at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Rashi quotes the midrash that says that at first Moses rejected this contribution. He said, I'm not taking mirrors. Mirrors is an object of vanity. It's used for the evil inclination to create lust. Why would I use that in the holy temple? And God says to Moses, that is the most precious donation I've received, more than the gold and more than the silver. These copper mirrors are the most valuable, most desirable gift. Why? Because the Jewish women established legions in Israel with these copper mirrors. And Rashi goes on to explain that when the men were doing back-breaking labor as slaves in Egypt, they would come home after a day's work and they were physically exhausted and they had no desire to be intimate with their wives. But the women understood that if they're not with their husbands, they won't have children, and without children there'll be no future Jewish nation. And so what did they do? During the day when their husbands were working as slaves, they would bring them food and drink in the fields. And they would beautify themselves with these mirrors. And as the men were working, they would show them their reflection in the mirror, their beauty, and say to them, look how beautiful I am. And they would entice them and whet their appetite to want to be with their wives. So when they would come home, they would procreate and be intimate with them and have children. And God says these mirrors is what saved the Jewish people, produced the next generation of Jewish children, and established legions of a nation. And therefore, they're the most beautiful gift, the most precious of all the objects in the temple. And the powerful lesson from this is that, you see, yesterday the IDF went back to war. Tragically, Hamas refused to give back the hostages. And after so many failed attempts with Israel and America, and Hamas refusing time and again, Israel had no alternative but to go back to fight for the freedom of our hostages. And the world will start condemning Israel again, showing pictures of bombed buildings and children and women being killed, and Israel will be on the cover of every newspaper that we're the aggressors, when the reality is that we gave them every opportunity to return the hostages, and every death in Gaza is on Hamas. And we are all the protesters crying for the hostages when Hamas refuses to release them. But we will get condemnation. But the IDF has to do what it does. But we are also part of the army. You see, the Torah refers to these women as the women who are maros hatzovos, who gave their mirrors for the legions of Israel. Now, a legion is a unit in an army, but the word sovot is from the word sava, like tzva haganah Yisrael. And what the Torah is telling us is that you don't have to be a soldier in an army with a gun to be a soldier, to be in a tzava. What is a tzava? An army is a force that goes to war against an enemy. And yes, there's one way to go, which is the literal way with ammunition, but there are many other ways to be in the army, to fight evil. And the women in Egypt said, Pharaoh is decreeing death on the Jewish people, the annihilation of the Jewish people, by not allowing our husbands to be with us, by giving them back-breaking labor. That's the way he's planning on destroying us, so there won't be a Jewish nation left. So we have to go to war against that. And how are we going to do that? With our mirrors. Our mirrors are our ammunition, with our beauty, with our enticing our husbands, not with violence, but with love. And that was the war, the tzava, the army, the women army, that won the war, because it made sure that there was a Jewish nation born in Egypt to be redeemed, and that's why we're here till today. And the lesson is every one of us has to find our way to join the army. There's many ways to fight evil, and everyone in their own way can find a way to be a member of the tzava, just like the women use their mirrors to join the army of mirrors through love and connection with their spouses to rebuild the Jewish nation. And a great example of this was just last week. One of the hostages who was released, her name is Daron Katz. She was taken on October 7th together with her two daughters, 2 and 4 years old, Aviva and Raz. And she spent 49 days in captivity with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And tragically, her mother was killed and her brother was killed on October 7th. And she still has family members in captivity, being held hostage. But after she came out, she decided that she wants to have another child. And last week, she gave birth to her 3rd beautiful daughter, baby girl, together with her husband, Yoni. And she said, "This is my ray of light in the midst of all this darkness. Yes, I'm going to fight by building my family, by having another child. My life was almost lost in captivity, and the lives of my children, I'm going to produce more life, just like the women did in the temple." Let us pray for the success of the Tzava Haganah Yisrael, the army of Israel, in defeating this evil in our midst. But let us also join the ranks of the IDF by being in our Tzava, our army, and finding our way to stand up and to help strengthen and build the Jewish nation together, just like the women in Egypt did. Have a wonderful day.